And now I am very pleased to introduce you to Jacqueline Steenbergen-Biesterbos. She is a toxicologist at the Food and Consumer Product Safety Authority in the Netherlands. Good to have you here. And we will take a closer look now on, closer said, like, well, yeah, we skip everything that's not food. With medicine, it's not our business, but there are, of course, food supplements that have a pharmaceutical impact, and we will hear more on that now. Thanks for being here.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Before I would like to start the actual presentation, I would like to introduce myself. As already said, my name is Jacqueline Steenberg, and I'm indeed a risk assessor and toxicologist at the Office for Risk Assessment and Research. And it's funny because the Office for Risk Assessment and Research also celebrates its 20th anniversary this year. But it probably has to do something with the enforcement of the General Food Law 20 years ago. So we will have a small party next Friday. As you can see in this slide, the Office for Risk Assessment and Research is placed from an organizational perspective under the Strategy Directorate of the Netherlands Food and Consumer Product Safety Authority, the NVWA. However, our director has a direct line to the head of agency. And this is done to strictly regulate, or no, not regulate, to separate the processes of risk management, risk assessment, which is done by our office, and the process of risk management, which is done by the other divisions of the NVWA. Before I started working at the Office for Risk Assessment and Research, I worked at the Tactical Direction and Expertise Department. So this means that I have knowledge of both risk assessment and risk management. The Office for Risk Assessment and Research, also Bureau Risikobewertung en Onderzoek in Dutch, so for short Bureau, provides independent advice to the Inspector General, so the head of agency of the NVWA, the Dutch Ministry of Health, Welfare and Sports, and the Dutch Ministry of Agriculture, Nature and Food Quality. An advice consists of scientific-based risk assessments on several topics. So we have food safety, consumer product safety, animal health, animal welfare, plant health and nature. And an advice can be provided upon request, but also upon our own initiative. So, with my presentation, I would like to address the following topics. So first, I would like to tell you something about what are food supplements, tell you something about the involved risks, give you some examples, tell you something about the challenges we face regarding legislation, and I will end with the HUA working group on food supplements. So what are food supplements? It has been said today already that the definition has been presented. So I've stated here the definition according to Directive 2002/46. But I will not go into detail this because it has been told already today. The only thing I would like to say about this definition is that it is a bit out of date since it's 20 years old, and that it might lead to miscommunication between member states because small unit quantities can mean something different in member states, so it's difficult. In general, one can distinguish three types of food supplements. So the first one are the vitamins and minerals, the second one are the botanicals or the herbal supplements, and the third one are the other substances. And with the other substances, I mean substances which used to be medicines who were withdrawn from the market due to safety issues, or maybe former research drugs which are now used in food supplements because of their possible, I would not say beneficial properties, but promising properties for instance, weight loss. So, as you all might be aware, there are some risks involved when using food supplements. In the Netherlands, we did some research, and we concluded that a lot of substances are not correctly declared on the label when you are taking a food supplement. And this might lead to health risks, especially when you take more pills than prescribed on the label. you can imagine that if someone takes a certain food supplement which is focusing on weight loss and one pill does the trick, why shouldn't I take 2 pills? Maybe I could lose some weight a bit more or a bit faster. And this might be the difference between losing weight or dying, especially if you think about the substance D and P. Another adverse health effect might be result from the interaction with medicine. So again, a weight loss supplement, which has maybe some, activating purposes, and you also are taking medicines which are for your heart, for instance, they might give an interaction which is not good for you. And also the same is true for strenuous physical exercise. So you would get an activating food supplement, but you're also activating your heart by doing exercise. So if is this 1 and 1, is this 2, or is 1 and 1 3, or maybe 4? You don't know. And at last, I would like to say that a positive doping test might also be the result of substances that are not declared on the label. As an athlete, you think you do the right thing by taking a certain supplement, but then in the end you test positive on doping because some ingredient was not stated on the label, but this ingredient is present on the prohibited substance list by the World Anti-Doping Agency. Now I would like to talk you through an example which was a big case in the Netherlands recently. It's about Shambhala. In this slide you see Giel Belen. Giel Belen is a famous radio DJ in the Netherlands, and he promoted a food supplement called Shambhala. And if you want to find your inner guru, you had to take Shambhala. And at the NVWA, we received concerns by the Dutch Poison Center, who said, okay, be aware, this product is on the market, and we have concerns because it might have some, antidepressing properties. Be aware. Okay, we said, okay, we would be aware. That was on I think it was on Friday, and on Monday there was a TV show in the Netherlands called Radar, which is focused on consumer safety, and they had an item on the same product because they also had concerns about the product. And they asked in the TV show, Giel, can you explain to us what is actually in the product, because that was not clear, and can you explain to us that it's safe? And Giel said, okay, it's safe, I will show you. And he just literally took half a bottle in front of the camera. And he said, okay, now I'm fine, so it's safe. So after this TV show, the NVWA decided to get some samples of the Shambhala and to analyze the product. When looking at the label, Shambhala consisted of 2 plants, namely Kapi and Bobinsana. And Kapi is also one of the ingredients of ayahuasca, which is a mind-liberating drug. So we had some concerns about safety. So when we collected the product, it was analyzed by the Wageningen Food Safety Research, the WWFSR, and they concluded that Shambhala contains the beta-carboline alkaloids harmine, harmaline, and tetrahydroharmine. And with this information, we asked the RIVM, so the Public Institute for Health in the Netherlands, to do a risk assessment. And the RIVM concluded that Shambhala might have harmful effects from a single use, and there might be harmful interactions with other MHO inhibitors, so the antidepressing properties. And if you want to have a close look on this risk assessment, it's available on the internet, and I have posted the link. Wrong button. Here. There you can find the complete risk assessment. So with this risk assessment in mind, and the conclusion that Shambhala was not safe, the NVWA used Article 14 of the General Food Law for enforcement, and Shambhala and another similar product was retrieved on the Dutch market. And the NVWA also made a small film in which they communicated to the consumers that they should not use this product. And in the media, Giel was sort of, killed for the fact that he promoted an unsafe product, but that's just side information. Okay, with this slide, I would like to give you some more information about the challenges or the possibilities we have if we have a food supplement which contains a pharmacologically active substance. The first thing we have to ask ourselves, what is the status of the product? In the Netherlands, we have 3 options. So the first one would be, is it a new psychoactive substance, so an NPS? Is it medicine or is it food? Legislation regarding the NPS is still being created in the Netherlands, so I will not go into detail about that yet, but if that is entered into force, we will use the Opium Act to retrieve certain products from the market. Then there are 2 options left. The first one would be, is there a medicine? Until 2009, the presence of a substance in food supplement was sufficient to trigger interventions under the Medicines Act. However, case law has narrowed down the definition, so the definition of what is a medicine has become more strict. Now the content must be sufficient to have an effect, and the product must be intended to prevent or cure a disease, and consumers must be able to know that a product is in fact a medicine. If you meet all these criteria, then you can use the Medicines Act for enforcement. If that's not the case, there's only one option left, and that's food. So if you have food, there are certain options, and I will go from the top to down. So the first one is, if you have food, is your ingredient, is it regulated? We have seen that on an EU level there is some regulation, but not much. On a national level in the Netherlands, we also have a very limited regulation. A few herbs or plants or substances are forbidden, but that's not much. In the Netherlands, we are currently working on a negative list for substances which we want to be forbidden in food supplements, but we don't have a negative list yet. Other member states, they do have negative lists. So if it's a regulated ingredient, we can use this regulation and then it's clear. If it's not a regulated ingredient, we will ask ourselves, is it an unauthorized novel food? If this is the case, we will just use the novel food regulation. And if it's not the case, we will have to assess if there's a health risk present, yes or no. And to assess if there's a health risk present, yes or no, we will use a risk assessment. However, for a lot of substances, this is very challenging because a lot of toxicological information is not present. And with no toxicological information present, you cannot do a risk assessment. There are some, other routes you can take. For instance, in the Netherlands, we also use the TTC approach in order to get an answer for a risk assessment. Although the TTC approach is not actually designed for this purpose, but we thought we should be a bit of a creative mode. So if there's a health risk, we would use Article 14 of the General Food Law. But if we cannot conclude this, or if there's not sufficient information, it can be the case that we cannot conclude there's a health risk and a certain substance or product might be still on the market. But if it's safe, we don't really know. But there's no tools for us to use for enforcement. There's also one other point I would like to draw your attention to, and that's the mutual recognition principle, which makes enforcement also difficult. So the mutual recognition principle is the fact that if a food supplement is accepted on the market in one member state in the EU, all other member states have to accept this product as well. The only way you can prevent such a product is by proving the fact that it's not safe, and therefore you need, again, a risk assessment. If you want to have more information on this, and also the fact how in the Netherlands we dealt with substances with less toxicological information available, I would like to point out to this bureau advice, which describes it all, and it's also available on the internet. So in the beginning of 2021, the Portuguese presidency held a high-level food conference on food supplements, and they concluded that a revision of the current legislation is needed. And indeed, what we need is a clear and enforceable legal provisions facilitating the implementation of common requirements and the harmonization of market conditions throughout the European Union. And this was also supported by a report by the European Economic and Social Committee. However, the European Committee is working really hard on their farm to fork strategy, and they do not prioritize this conclusion that was drawn for food supplements, except the setting of maximum values for vitamins and minerals, which is a start. So now you can imagine that with all the lack of harmonized regulation on food supplements, we need something, and therefore the HOA working group on food supplements was started. HOA is the head of food safety agencies, and the working group was founded by Germany and Ireland, and a first meeting was held in November 2020. Now currently Germany and the Netherlands are chairing this working group, and the purpose is to establish a list of substances in food supplements that need to be forbidden or limited. And with that, we want to facilitate enforcement of substances with a potential risk. So with this slide, I will give you an overview of how the procedure is until now. So here you see that we will start with a lot of substances. And these substances are coming from the DACH list, or other substances that were pointed out by member states for which risk assessment were available. And the first question we ask ourselves is a certain substances novel, yes or no? Because if it's novel, it needs to be in the novel food catalog. And then if it's in the novel food catalog, it's clear to the enforcement agencies as well as the food business operators what the status of a certain product is, and we do not have to mind it in our working group anymore. If a certain substances is not novel, then we have to assess the risk. And for this we need risk assessment. A lot of substances are present, but not many risk assessment are. Based on this risk assessment or other information, we would like to try to classify the substances and to see if they need to be on part A or B of Annex 3 of the 1925-2006, or maybe on part C of this annex. Oh, something went wrong here. Okay, so this is the final slide, and it's just another overview of how we work. So the first one would be novel, no, okay. Is it a novel? Yes, then it should be in the novel food catalog, which is very clear and enhances enforcement. And if it's not novel, we need to have, if we have enough information and risk assessment available, we can put it on part A or B of the annex. And if we don't have enough risk assessment available, it should be on part C, and information can be collected within this annex. So in the end, what do we want? We want to give reliable information for stakeholders and to facilitate enforcement of substances with a potential risk by competent authorities. And with this, I would like to close. And thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, Jacqueline Steenbergen.